Well, I mean, I believe that you're born with your passions innately kind of embedded inside you. So it's not so much what influences you growing up, it's when you allow what's around you to almost not influence you and tap into what's in here. So I was fortunate to grow up around um, my father, who was really into music. So we spent a lot of time listening to records together. And he taught me how to play guitar. He taught me how to play drums. And I took some piano lessons in there. But I learned a little from his passion of recording, which really helped me when I wanted to become a producer, to not just be a performer, but to understand how studios work, because he was always interested in studio equipment. So that helped a lot. But I felt probably when I mean, my earliest photos where I'm able to put a Walkman on, I have headphones on. Even when I was like, I must have been 4 or 5 years old. Um, I remember I went to Argentina, and I don't even remember this. It's just seeing the photos. So that's where my mother was born, and we're visiting family, and in all the pictures I have all these headphones on, and I'm 5, and I'm just wondering what I was listening to.
So you can't remember what the music was?
my my earliest memory was like Run DMC, Raising Hell. That was that was a big record for me. But being 5, 6 years old. But yeah, so music, I think really the Beatles was a big one. My dad used to make me cassette tapes of the Beatles stuff, and discovering the Beatles that young was like, it was incredible. And then taping songs off the radio. I was really into making my own mixtapes and stuff. And yeah, and then slowly it just sort of went from being a fan of music to starting to play a little bit. And when I was forced again to take music lessons, I didn't enjoy it because I didn't like the strict nature of being told how to play and what to play. And classical music can be very stuffy, and you know it's not hip hop, rap, punk, rock. It's a little uptight. So for me, I didn't enjoy the process of being in piano lessons, but I'm grateful that I went because I learned my sort of basic chord structures. But I pretty much forgot how to read completely. So when I'm composing now, I don't really understand what's happening on paper. So I have to have people, help me if I'm writing string charts or things for other musicians, because I don't really understand um, the musical theory of it. So what I was going to say earlier about this innate sort of passion is, when you're born with this and you tap into it, it just it naturally starts to express itself, and it naturally starts to manifest itself. And all you have to do is not get in the way of that. And fortunately for me, my passion and my fire was so strong that I just let it guide me, even though a lot of people, would say things like, it's not realistic to want to be an artist growing up. You'll have to get real at some point. But I didn't really buy into that. And so, yeah, my childhood was between being a fan of music and just starting to learn the instruments. It was like music 24 hours a day.
I've heard it said that, just like you mentioned, you think those gifts and those passions are already inside of you. I've heard it said that you need to get out there and do things and travel and try things to carve out what is actually inside of you. If you're just sitting at home on the couch all day, it's like you don't discover those passions and talents. You have to get out there and let that come out.
Well, yeah, you have to tinker and play around with what might inspire you. If you take a trip somewhere, like the first time maybe I saw, a punk rock show in Detroit, all of a sudden, this has changed my life. But the first time I, jammed with a band or listened to a Nirvana record or whatever, was like, you have to sort of exercise and move around and try new things to see what it is waiting, and I believe everybody has talent. A lot of my friends talk about, we talk about, well, I should have done this with my life, or should have done that with my life. We just brainstorm and hang out. And a lot of times I ask my friends, what is it that you would do if you were not worried about money or not worried about survival. Like, what is it you get lost in? You can just, time goes away. And they're like, oh, I love to draw, or I love to, woodwork or whatever. And so I said, well, go do that. That's your talent. It's always that thing that everybody enjoys to do the most that is sometimes not being watered, because the school system kind of pushes us to just be this, robotic, you're in a box, you finish school, you have to do all these things, and it's not realistic to follow your talents. But everybody has those passions, everybody, even if it's making salad dressing and you love that recipe, that's the passion coming out, and no one's going to do it in the way that you can.
Hey, some people have made a fortune just with salad dressing,
Oh,
so
it's anything. And that's what I love nowadays, that people are making money in new ways. Like, you can be a video game pro and just even walk through a video game and make all of this money. When I was young, I mean, I love video games. When I was young, it was like a waste of time. There's millionaires playing video games now.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just a bunch of losers playing video games. And you used to think it was these kids, right, these nerdy kids, and now I think the average age of the video game player is like 35 to 45 or 35 to 50. It's all the people that were those nerdy kids that have grown up that have the money to spend on video games.
Yeah, and they're designing really incredible games now. Like a lot of the indie games are just really super cool, and it's a fascinating thing. But I just love seeing new ways that people can explore their gifts. To me, that's a turn on for me. Like, people that hate their jobs or hate their lives, I understand that that's part of the growth that we all go through. But it's great to see people just following through with their dreams and their talents.
So I can see behind you a few of the instruments. So you play bass, you play guitar, you play piano, you play drums, you're a singer. Am I missing any instruments? There's maybe a few more.
Well, piano was my main, and that is usually like the main route to most instruments. So yeah, piano, and then I learned guitar. Drums was always my favorite. And
Okay.
I could be and do anything, would be, drums. And then a little bit of bass along the way. And vocals, I do my best. I've never been a strong singer, but I do my best, and it is what it is. I like to deliver the songs with other artists a lot. But so vocals, and then I know a little bit about string arrangements and stuff just by the way it sounds. So I do some orchestrations, and then production and mixing.
And do you think of yourself as a multi-instrumentalist, or do you think of yourself as a drummer or a songwriter or piano? Is there something that stands out more than others, or it's my strength is in the variety of what I can do?
It's pretty even. Like I always say, jack of all trades, master of none. Like I'm not really good at anything musically, but I can handle my own on everything musically. So like when you listen to like the Grace, and you hear a band and it's just me, that to me, I'm not a flashy player. I'm not doing anything that's like, it's 5 chords, 6 chords, but uh I'm proud of what happens within being able to handle each part, much in the way I'd mentioned before about, Dave Grohl, or you'd mentioned Huxley Workman, being able to have enough talent on each instrument to go in and actually not only perform the part cleanly, but emotionally, and also to understand what the instrument needs to do in the song. And that's not everybody can do that. You have to be respectful of the song. Like I can't walk in to a ballad like the Grace and then just start showing off all these guitars. So it's not meant for that. So even when I approach it as a drummer, the drummer in me wants to play a lot of drum fills and be busy. But playing for the song means I'm not almost playing any fills. I'm just playing really simple, and I'm sort of giving that romance to the song so that every part is coming together the way to maximize the strength of the song itself. So that's a talent too. I don't think a lot of people realize that if you are a multi instrumentalist, that you have to know how to be respectful of all the other parts.
Yeah, I think a big part of the songwriting process, the struggle is between the ego of the musician wanting to show what they're capable of versus what's best for the song, you know. And sometimes, you know, you have a Blue Rodeo song where Glenn Milcham, the drummer, is incredible. He could play anything, and he just has to sit back and do what's best for the song. You know, it's tough.
Yeah, especially when it's just you. You
Oh
know.
yeah, especially yeah for you. Yeah.
So to touch on that thing too, you know, it gets a little bit lonely and one-sided to not have other souls in the song, and it can get a little bit boxy and linear to have like just one person. So I have to be cognizant of kind of shaking up how I want to approach everything. So that's not so, you know, I don't want it to always sound just like me, even though it does. But so if I'm going to do bass, I try to, you know, get inspired by certain songs. Maybe I'll listen to some old 70s stuff, or, you know, I'll try different techniques and things. And I try to just, I don't know, find a way to be um, like almost like another persona, different character. How is he going to come in and play the bass, you know? So, yeah. So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, so we'll dive into where the idea came from for the project for Neverending White Lights. You know, why are you playing all the instruments instead of putting a band together? Why you have other singers when you're a good singer? All those things we'll dive into. You piqued my curiosity. So you mentioned when you were really young, you had the headphones on with a cassette player. You can't quite remember the music you were listening to. If we go a little bit older, so say you're 16, let's say we're friends at 16 years old, you invite me over to listen to your music. What albums are you playing for me at that time at 16?
that was one of the greatest periods of music, mid 90s. So between 93 and 96 was very special. For me, 95 was my favorite. Like if I just go back and think of the records that came out that year. Um, but yeah, so circa 96, um, one of my favorite records of that time was Siamese Dream by the Smashing Pumpkins, which probably would have been 94, I think. But that was in rotation all the time. I was a big fan of Sloan Twice Removed around that time, which I think is potentially the greatest Canadian record.
It shows up on all the lists of greatest Canadian albums of all time.
And then actually the follow up to that record, One Chord to Another, was a 96 record, which I listened to a lot. Evil Empire by Rage Against the Machine, that was 1996. That was a much warmer record than their first record, and was a lot of fun. Used to cruise around in that one. And then there was this band called Shudder to Think that I was obsessed with at the time. They're a Washington, D.C. band, really artsy, punky rock, very complicated. It took me years to really get into it, but that was one of my favorite records at the time. And then like a lot of the Canadian East Coast stuff, like, you know, the Thrush Hermit. I like the Killjoys a lot. Rusty, you know, like the mid 90s Canadian bands were.
Was Great Big Sea, is that one of them too, or no?
A huge fan of the more Celtic leanings. But I do appreciate dancing to them at midnight when they always put on "You'll Have to Excuse Me, I'm
Yeah.
not." All right, it's like the big drinking song. They're a great band though. But there was also an artist named M. Griner who had come out at the end of the 90s, who's another Canadian girl. She was the angel in my music video. And I always go back to that record when I think about that period of time, like late 90s Canadian stuff. Estero was another really great one. But yeah, I was in my 90s period. I didn't really go retro 80s till much later. I've gone through different periods of time where I kind of rediscover things from the past or different genres. I had a shoegaze phase for a while, I had a new wave phase for a while, a Bowie phase for a while. But yeah, like mid 90s, I was just consuming everything that came out. It was just so exciting to go and buy those things. I mean, when Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness came out by Smashing Pumpkins, it was like I was first in line at the store. Same thing with Tool's second record, Anima. That was like, I mean, I remember leaving class to go get that one, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great,
So good.
great time for indie, like alternative grunge rock.
Yeah. So in response to all that great music, a few things. So I had Tool's producer David Bottrell on recently,
Oh,
and
one of my favorite producers of all time.
yeah, yeah. So he produced and mixed Anima, Lateralis. Yeah, it's crazy. So as a massive Tool fan, I actually, we have a 2 or 2.5 hour interview, and there's about 25 minutes straight of Tool questions about like the Fibonacci sequence, about the drums, about no click tracks, all that stuff. So that clip of 25 minutes is one of the most popular things that I have going around online. And man, there's no more diehard fans than Tool fans. That's what I've come to learn.
Absolutely, they're incredible. David Bottrell is a legend. Like he produced a record by Silverchair
Yeah, two of them.
called
He produced one and he mixed one. So Diorama and there's another one. Anyways, he did two of them.
I reached out to him to mix my new record.
Oh, okay.
I'm such a huge fan of his, and he's expensive. So I don't know, but the Silverchair record, Diorama, was just the orchestration on that record's incredible. And I think David also did a band called Remy Zero.
Yeah. It's in the 90s, right? Or
Yeah.
early 2000s or something.
There was a record called Villa Elaine, if I'm not mistaken, and it is probably one of my top favorite albums of all time. It's just a hidden gem of a masterpiece of a record. I think that was David's work, and it sounds incredible.
You also mentioned Rage Against the Machine. So their debut album from '92 is in my top two favorite albums of all time. So I'm a big Pink Floyd fan as well. So those are my top two.
Yeah, that was the other thing. I got my heart broken when I was 16, like a real heartbreak,
Oh
and
no.
I was like listening to Dark Side of the Moon on repeat. I had actually just discovered it. I didn't really know much Floyd before I was 16. And I worked at a pawn shop, and I think I stole it. And I'm like, what's the fuss all about? And I was listening to the Pink Floyd record, and like the song Great Gig in the Sky, where the gospel singer's just wailing and wailing, and I would just put it on repeat, you know, self-masochism, self
Yeah.
listening to the sadness kind of seep its way through, and then just going through this emotional healing from this breakup that I went through. And I always remember that girl, and I always remember Dark Side of the Moon.
Hmm. Yeah. Dark Side of the Moon, The Wall, Wish You Were Here. They have so many great albums. And with Rage Against the Machine, so I never thought I'd be able to see them live because they broke up pretty early on. Um, I'm seeing them next week at Blues Fest in Ottawa. I have tickets, so I can't wait, man. I never thought I'd be able to see them.
Let me know how it is, because I've got tickets to see him in Toronto.
Oh snap, man! That's gonna be so good. And the last thing, with everything you said, you talked about M. Griner. I've done my homework. I have some kind words here from M. Griner for one Daniel Victor. So M. Griner, you mentioned, was featured in your music video for The Grace. She's the angel, and she says Daniel is a lovely guy, and shooting the video was an adventure. Best song ever, and I was so honored to be the angel for 5 minutes. So that's from M. Griner.
That is so sweet. Thank you for sharing that. What an incredible sentiment. She's a lovely girl, and that was my first video, so I was green, and I didn't know. I mean, I'm not an actor, and I had to act in it because it's not me singing, and I didn't know what I was doing on camera. And she was there to kind of help me through it, and I got to kiss her, which was really awesome. So such a huge fan of hers, and always thought she was just so beautiful. And we got to talk music, and we became good friends after that. So that was really great.